how fast it moves when we see each other every day. I'm just going to flip the answer key back for those people online real quick. The reason we're doing this to our warm-up today is this is going to be something we're going to do throughout class today a lot. We're actually going to use what happens when x is 0 in our equation, and we're actually do the same thing with the y. What it's going to do is give us a really special point on our graph that's going to be helpful. So the good news is I think putting 0 in as a value is a really easy value to put in, because anytime I multiply by 0, it's just 0. But there usually is some addition and subtraction there as well. So we put 0 in. So 2 times 0 is 0, minus 7. So y would be negative 7. So if I wanted that coordinate point, if I wanted to put that on my graph, the point would be 0, negative 7 for that first one. So just substituting that x value in, and if you didn't write it as a coordinate point, perfectly fine. It's just eventually we're going to graph that point. Same thing goes for the next one. Again, x is 0, put that in. Works out really nicely with fractions because half of 0 is still just 0. So in this case, the x and y are both zeros. Now letter C is a little bit bigger of a pain, like you might have noticed, and hopefully you're starting to kind of gather it's a bigger pain to find the y value if y is not already alone for you. But 0 actually makes it not so bad. So when I go to put the 0 in for our x, four times 0 is just 0. So this basically cancels out there. Sorry, 2y equals 8. So then I just have to solve that. So I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to find out y is 4. So again, that coordinate point would be 0, 4. So looking at those 3 points, does anyone notice something that that there is in common about those in general? Probably it's kind of obvious to begin with, but what do you know, Griffin? They have zeros for the x, right? So if I were to graph them, where would they all show up? Where would these all show up? Yeah.
On the line.
On which line?
That line. Y line.
It's the y line, yeah. So all of these points would show up on the y-axis. So if I'm thinking about graphing these, which we don't need to, don't put them on this graph, but if you were picturing putting these on this graph, 0, negative 7, 0, 0, and 0, 4 would all show up on this vertical y-axis. They would all be right on this same axis. So the point of that is those are all the same type of point. We call those intercepts. So we're going to define that, and then we'll use those here today. So an intercept is just basically a point on one of the axes. And so, actually now I realize there's not an equation with this one anyway, I guess I don't know. So, actually I might just put all of them on there. So 0, 4, 0, 0, 0, negative 7, all of these points are called intercepts. Since they're on the y-axis, they're called y-intercepts. So these are points on the y-axis. And for all of those points, x would equal 0. We're going to use What do you think x-intercepts are? Yeah. Yeah, so crazy. I mean, like again, these names aren't meant to be like brain surgery, but these are going to be points on the x-axis. Oops, I should say points. And what are you going to know about those? Yep. Yeah, so in this case, y is going to equal 0. So any of the points on the x-axis are going to be called x-intercepts, and those points would, where y equals 0, where the ones on the y-axis is where x equals 0. So those are going to be, basically what we're going to graph today is we're going to graph with just 2 points. So those of you guys yesterday who were like, we're making a table of values of all of these with like 5 points, this is really getting annoying. I know it's a straight line, I don't know why I need so many points. Today is only 2. We're going to find each of the intercepts, and then we'll be able to graph the line. You're going to see today that some problems are really, really nice for this, and then others are a little bit of a pain, and we'll kind of see some of those. I won't give you too many of them because they're annoying when they don't work out nicely. So it says graph a line with the following intercepts. So this first one is asking us to graph the line that has the intercept of an x-intercept of -4 and a y-intercept of 5. So just reminding ourselves that x-intercept is a point on the x-axis. So it's on the x-axis, which is this one. So at -4, but if you want to think about that, remember that means y equals 0. So this point would be -4, 0. You don't have to write all that, we just want to put that point on the graph. Kind of trying to get you to wrap your mind around what they're telling us here. Then the y-intercept is 5, so that's going to be a point on the y-axis. And that's where x is 0, so that point would be 0, 5. Go up here. Now, if I have 2 points, I can put a ruler through those, a straight edge, or I can draw a really nice straight line that goes through those 2. And really, that's going to be the same line we would get had we made a table of values. Now, this one we would be able to make a table of values for. They don't give us enough information. But if we have 2 points, we have enough to draw a line. So once I have those 2 points, then I'm just going to draw a line through those 2 points as best I can, and there's our line. So rather than having to make this huge table of values with a whole bunch of different ones, those 2 points are enough. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, the ones we were doing yesterday are probably a little bit more precise. The more dots you have, the more connecting we can do, the more our line is probably a little bit more accurate. Kind of look over here, I didn't really go as straight maybe as I wanted to, so the line's probably not quite as accurate as yesterday, but it's still a line, it's fine. So, that being said, so this one they kind of just gave us straightforward information. Now they're giving us an equation instead. But we have enough information here to help us to be able to figure out what those points should be. So they want us to graph this using intercepts. Now if you recall yesterday, I said let's get the y alone. Don't do that today. This is like the one time for graphing. I don't want you to get the y alone. So leave it the way it is. We're going to graph using intercepts, this equation, and I'm going to use the information I know up here. So x-intercept is where y equals 0. So I'm going to find a point like that. And then the y-intercept is where x equals 0. So I'm going to find each of these by substituting those values in separately. So these are going to be 2 different substitutions I'm going to do, and then I'll get 2 points from that. So we'll start by putting y in as 0. So the x-intercept is where the y is 0. We said that, kind of pointed out why that is. So we're going to put that in for our y here. So I put 0 for y. Really nice thing happens. When I multiply by 0, that whole term just cancels out. Sometimes people even call this the cover-up method, that they just kind of 12. So I can solve, just like we did in the warm-up question. And I find out x is going to be 6. So this is my first coordinate point. I don't want to combine these in any way. I want to keep them as two separate parts here. So 6, 0. So I'm halfway through this problem. I already have the 1 point. So 6, 0, I'm going to put on my graph. Now I'm going to figure out the y-intercept. So now I'm putting the other variable in as 0. So 2 times 0 this time, minus 4y equals 12. Just be careful with that negative now in this case. Again, cover-up method was just say I just basically cover up that 2x and I'd be left with negative 4y equals 12. And I'm showing a lot of steps. You probably don't need to show this many. These have become like one-step equations. So hopefully this is not an issue for you guys at this point. So 12 divided by negative 4 is a negative 3. So now this coordinate point is 0, negative 3. So I have 2 points. That's enough to draw a line. So then I would draw a line through those 2 points. My friend made me a new mask, and it's like itchy because I didn't wash it before. Like the fabric is giving me, it makes me like I don't know, allergic to something in it or sneeze to wash. I feel like I'm all agitated. So sorry if I feel like I'm scratching my face. So now we can draw our line. And that was not a very good line, but you get the picture. So the big thing is getting the intercepts in the right spot. We only have 2 of them, so hopefully you can kind of double check your work. That's probably one of the things that's a little bit tougher with these, is if you're wrong, it's not like you're gonna have another point to kind of help you. I mean, I guess if you wanted to try a different point and see if it was like in the right spot, you could do that. But the idea is that we only have the 2 points. We're just going to go for it and hope they make us the line we're looking for. So if you guys want to flip the page here, why don't I give you guys a minute to try this one. So example 3 here. Take a minute to try this one. See if you guys can get it to work. I'm going to warn you, 4 and 5 are a little bit tricky. So focus on 3 right now, and if you want to look ahead, you can. But work on 3 for right now. Would you guys rather do boards or Kahoot? It's your choice.
Boards.
Sorry. You can do the Kahoot on the boards. There you go. Like, best of both worlds. right, how'd that go? So reminder, the y, or the x-intercept is where y is 0. It's kind of the opposite of maybe what you anticipate. And then this one's where x is 0. So when I go to put y in as 0, I do x plus 2 times y, which is 0. So again, that crosses out. So I just find out x is just going to be 6. So it works out really nicely. So 6, 0. Was that the last one too? It's not always 6, 0. 6. All right, and the y-intercept is where x is 0. So the 0 goes in as x. Now if you're like, gosh, she's showing a lot of steps. On these, I honestly, you guys, these are one-step equations. I'm okay with you guys doing a little bit more work in your head. I do want to see them as coordinate points at the end, like I want to see what your point is. So this goes away, so I get 2y equals 6, divide by 2, so y is 3. So 0, 3. So then we can draw that line. Is that exactly the same as the last one? No, okay. It seemed like it was. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it got real crazy and different. All right. Did anyone try example 4? See what's maybe a little bit tougher about example 4? Yeah, so if just one of them had to be 0, it would be not so bad. The next one is a little bit tougher. So on problems like the ones we've done so far, I love graphing by intercepts. Like obviously, I teach math, but I can look at that and know exactly where the intercepts are just by looking at the problem. Like I don't really need to show my steps. I can see, I look at a problem like that and just know where the intercepts are. This next one would take a little bit more thinking because the intercepts aren't both such nice numbers. So one of the intercepts in this case is actually going to end up being a decimal, which this would be a circumstance where I'd say graphing by intercepts maybe isn't our best bet. We're going to learn another method on Monday that I would probably choose to use instead of intercepts here. But this one would not be a great one to graph by intercepts. I'm kind of trying to show you guys that there's times it works really nicely and other times not as much. So, same idea though. Now, the x-intercept is the one that's a little bit wonky in this case. So when I go to put in y is 0, that goes away, so I get 3x equals 8. There's no number, a whole number that works that would multiply by 3 to give me an 8, so I need a decimal. So this is kind of, like I said, this is where it's not as nice of a method. 8 over 3, which is like 2.6 repeating, 6, 7, 2.7-ish. So to show 2.7 on this graph is not going to go very well. It's not going to look like 2.7. It's going to look like maybe 2.5. It could look like, it's really hard to see exactly where that should go because our graph is not like zoomed super far in. That's okay, it's just not the best graph in the world then. So it's in between 2 and 3. I try to make it a little closer to 3 than to 2, but it's a big dot in the middle of 2 little spots. Make sure you stay with us guys here. So that one does not work as nice. So this is a circumstance where I'd be like, this isn't like my favorite, like this method doesn't work all the time so nicely. So now I'm going to put the 0 in for x. So that's going to go away. So the y isn't so bad though, but this is a negative y equals 8. How do I get my y alone?
You have to add y.
I don't know if I'd add y. You could, but it'd be more work. How do I get that y to not be a negative? Yeah, Luke?
Multiply by -1.
You can multiply or divide by -1, whatever you want to do. I usually divide, but multiplying works as well. You change the sign essentially. It's just the opposite sign. So it's a -8. Now, Clayton, like moving it over would work long as you moved them both. You basically flip where they are, and then the 8 would become negative. Okay. We'll do one more like this, and then we'll do a Kahoot, and then do our word problem. So, looking at the next one. Now the next problem is actually already solved for y. Like, so if you guys recall yesterday, I said let's solve things for y. That's a good thing to do. On these, it's not necessary. It makes it actually a little bit more work to graph by intercepts if you solve for y first. But we're still going to leave it. We're not going to like change it around. Just leave it the way it is. But again, I get y is 0 and then x is 0. Now in this case, again, the x-intercept's going to be a bigger pain. When I go to put y in as 0, how do I find my x now? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, so you can do a little bit of like, you guys both like thought of this, just like, why would you solve, I can tell what x is, like, and that's perfectly fine. Did anyone like do it showing it like algebraically? Would you move over? You did. So yeah, so you guys did it fine, and I don't need to see a ton of work for this on these problems, but we want to move this 10 over. If you want to show how you like would get that, and you guys kind of did this in your head already. So this is 10 equals 2x. So then I would divide by 2. So x is just 5. So 5, 0 would be my x-intercept. So a little bit more work to find that intercept. Now you're going to like the x-intercept in this case, or the y-intercept. It works out really nicely. Because the 2 times 0 just cancels. So y is just going to be negative 10. All right, so we're going to stop for right now with our notes. Don't put them too far away. We will come back to the word problem. You probably want scratch paper or a whiteboard or something for our Kahoot. So it's going to take us through intercepts. A few of them are graphing, so if you have a really hard time seeing in the back of the room, if you have to slide up or something, go ahead and do that. online, you can just play along, but you're not able to join the Kahoot because it's old. So it will not. Go ahead and feel free to slide. Yeah, they're not showing up. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, right. No, they just have, they've been out that long. Yeah, I think so. I think they, yeah, it's been since the start of this month. We haven't had it. Yeah, right, that's definitely, I think that's kind of why they chose to leave when they did. Okay, well, that's good. I think that makes sense. You know, or you can put it on my desk. Right, so. Yeah, like, he knows I'm frustrated, but, you know, like, because you see those, like, there. Yeah. Are you getting in there, like, right in?
Yeah.
Is everybody in? All right, again, the first couple are a little bit of graphing, so you might have to try and tell about where it is on the graph. Just know that, like, so if it's 3 and 5, if it's further wider, that means it's at the 5. If it's shorter, it's probably at the 3. So, sorry. The x-intercept so again, look at it. It's either 2 or -8. You're going to be able to figure it out which one it should be based off of how wide the graph is versus how tall. So you don't have to count every space. Look at the choices and make a logical choice. I messed it up. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
They're so easy to mess up. You'll overthink it.
Yeah, wherever you go. All right. So guys, I know we're gonna make mistakes. No worries. Okay. So, yeah. So being logical about this. Remember the x-intercept. The x-coordinate comes first. So sorry if that messed you up on this one. There's plenty of questions to come back, so don't give up. So y-intercept now this time. So again, you don't have to be able to see see really like, it's either 15 or 3, you can put negative 3, you can probably figure it out. So again, guys, careful. So 15 on the graph, I would hope you'd realize 15 would be much further away from the axis than the 3. So the y-intercept is just 3 away there. So this one's giving you an equation. Find the y-intercept. So again, use that cover-up method. Cover this up. All you're left with is y equals 7. And then just be able to write that. Well, it's the only choice that makes sense then.
You know what they do?
You should know. Because there's a giant box.
Wait, we can watch people's souls?
Again, I think of you, Justine, when I'm writing these things.
Justine, took your soul. No, I wish I would have. I would have. X-intercept this time, guys. So think about what you should be putting in as 0. Careful. Higher, try a little more work. Trista. Which one equals 0? The y. So the y is going to be 0. So that means that then we have to solve this one. So you either can do some guessing and checking, or you can move the 4 over. And then you divide by -2. So you find out your x is going to be 2. So that's the 2 value that make y equals 0. What's that? I didn't hear you.
How does that become negative?
Because you subtract it. Sorry.
See if they subtract it.
To move it over to the other side. Alright, big lead change there. Y-intercept this time.
good guess? All right, guys. So y-intercept is where x equals 0. So again, if you want to try this method, is you basically cover that up. So you get 3y equals a negative 12, so y has to be a negative 4. Hard to see. Sorry, guys. Oh, this is a weird one. Sorry. A joke.
Is this supposed to be clever?
Clever joke.
Yeah, I saw it.
Oh, I actually I don't understand. Oh, tweets instead of treats. Oh.
Yeah, sorry. It's supposed to be a joke. It was like sorry. I throw those ones in there to try and level the playing field. But that one was like from back Halloween time, and so it was supposed to be timely, but I messed it up. Sorry. The y-intercept. Think about what should equal 0 then.
Oh.
Okay, so guys, again, y-intercept is where x is 0. So again, this is gone, so we just get y is 5. Justine back on the leaderboard. Ooh, it wants you to graph it this time. Ooh, that's hard to see. Okay. So, guys, you're looking to see where you should go further. So look at the numbers. So like one is further up than the other. Positive and negatives make a difference. If you have to come up closer, go ahead. Kind of walk up.
Your
And,
post is not going to help.
sorry. You don't have to see every space though, guys. You're just trying to see which one should be further up the axis, which one should be further down. I thought that was the other person writing. Alright guys, so let's talk about this one, you guys. This didn't need to be as bad. I know you guys wanted to complain about it. But if I figure out each of the intercepts, I would figure out that the x-intercept is negative 2, 0, and I figure out the y-intercept is 0, negative 4. So I know they're both negative. So that tells me, so if I'm thinking about what this looks like, it doesn't have to, like I know that on the x-axis I'm going to be closer to the axis, on the y-axis I'm going to be further away. So I knew this is kind of what it should look like when I was looking for my graph. So I don't even have to count spaces, I just know 4 is going to be further away from the origin. Does that make sense? So kind of being a little bit logical with that. So if you knew what the intercepts were, you should have kind of been able to tell what the shape of the graph should look like. So start thinking about that as well. I know it's hard to see, but like that part of it I don't think should be. Ooh, look at that, Clay. Yeah,
worry how you never get into first. It just depends if your AR teacher reads announcements.
February is a long month week.
It's not, wait.
Yeah, we are celebrating. Wait, is February over next week?
Yeah, like so like next week is our last week of February, and then it's in March.
The week after
It is not spring break, hate to break it to you.
What?
What? I'm not. Alright.
Okay, good.
We're coming.
By like 2 points, that's about it.
Oh, no.
They want them both this time. They give you guys 2 minutes, so you have time. Find the x and y intercepts. 2 minutes.
Oh, I did not pass that.
Is not square.
What? It's not square.
No, those that would need both of those have 0 in the same spot.
He did it. I said you did.
Alright,
Hey, Jesse, get this thing wrong, please.
so yeah, this one's kind of a tough one with that decimal. But yeah, so like right away they were discussing, and I said it wasn't square because the y's are both 0 in this case. Remember the 0 has to flip where it is for each of the intercepts.
Yeah, I just got
Bamboozled.
Why?
So, alright,
I'm guessing.
Think about if you had to graph this. Think about where we touch an axis. Or axes.
I almost overthought that equation, and then I just
Oh, 15 seconds, you might take a good guess. It's like excruciating when it's a long time. Alright, so guys, if the equation is y equals 9x, if I put 0 in for x or 0 in for y, what's the other one going to be? 0. Because 9 times 0 is just 0. So both x and y are 0. So if I were to graph this, it would cross at the origin, and then it would just be like this really steep graph. So it would only touch in that one spot. So the x and y intercepts are actually the same spot. It's kind of a weird one. It'd be a tough one to graph by intercepts. You'd have to actually make a table to figure out
what it would look like. So definitely a tough question.
Yes, I took Klingon. I'm pretty sure.
It was right.
It's been in the announcements the last few days.
I know, I don't pay attention to the announcements.
Thanks, Justine. I wonder who your AR teacher is. Like, blah, 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 Mrs. Donahue.
Well, you know what?
Wasn't a place.
So, Mercy, you got them all right, but you probably take your time though, right? Like, yeah, so Trista and Kelly can come up to top 5. Come on up and pick up your prizes first.
I'm gonna say I was. I want to be suicide.
Alright, participation trophy, come on up.
Dude, I would've get that on over here. I got the only one I got wrong was the words. I got that one where it was like A, B, or C and a bunch of graphs. I knew the answer was the blue one, but I clicked the one that was obviously the wrong answer. It was like, I forgot who it was, but it was like so obvious. And then I clicked on it. I didn't even eat myself yesterday. Give me it. How about that? I'll take it wrong.
Just make sure you please don't leave your stick behind, your sucker stick. I think Clayton and I cleaned up yours last time. It was sitting at your table unless someone else left it there. What? Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's like all the
Okay, guys, we'll finish with this last question. Then you guys will have time for homework. So, this last question is trying to kind of show you guys how intercepts actually kind of like have an importance in certain circumstances. So, it says before 1979, there were no 3-pointers in basketball. Like the 3-point line didn't exist. So, there were only 2-pointers and 1-point shots. So the free throws and then the 1-point shot, and 2 points like regular shot. So in its particular game, some teams scored 128 points, where X is the number of 2-pointers and Y would be the number of 1-pointers. And that makes sense because the number of 2-pointers you should get 2 points for, number of 1-pointers you should only get 1 point for. So we want to find the X and Y intercept, and then we're going to talk about why those numbers would make sense, or why they'd be like kind of interesting in this scenario. So essentially they're just asking you to put in, so we want the Y or the X intercept, we're putting in zeros for each of those again. Why are these numbers, so those are the intercepts. Now this would be a pane of an equation to graph. This would be one where we want the graph paper that has no axes on it, that we just use only the positive part of the graph, because it'd be 64, 0, and then 0, 128. So we want to like be able to change our little scale and everything. why are these two numbers significant in this problem? They scored 128 points. Why would 64 be interesting or 128? Does anyone know why those would be? So this is 64, 0, and 0, 128. What is happening in each of those cases? Yeah, so this is kind of the two ends of the spectrum. Now, these two things probably wouldn't happen. So this case, kind of I think is what you were saying first, is if they scored no 2-pointers and only have 3 throws. That'd be the most ridiculous game ever. But they only got 1-point shots. That would be the only way that would happen, is if they scored no 2-pointers and 128 free throws. So obviously that's kind of the one end of the spectrum. What's the other end? So how would I explain this 64? Yeah, so if they didn't have any free throws, either they're horrible on the free-throw line or these refs aren't calling anything, we have 64 2-pointers and no free throws. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. Now, it's probably more likely a combination of those things happened, so somewhere in between there, but that's the most 2-pointers that they could have scored, and this is the most free throws they could have scored in this game. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. If I were to graph that, it would show me some of the other combinations that could work. So just trying to show you guys, intercepts are useful. Obviously, I use points a lot of times just because sports are kind of more where my head travels to, but it has some significance in a lot of different places. So homework is listed here for you guys. They're not all graphing homework assignments. Some are, or homework problems. Some are just asking you to find the intercepts. You do not have to graph it unless it tells you you have to graph it. So unless you're not reading the directions, you shouldn't be graphing all of them. I think you actually only have about 6 graphs total. So I will get you guys, and it might even be 5. So I'll get you guys your graph paper here. So please make sure you guys are reading directions, because if you're not, then you're probably doing more work than you need to.